Dr. Shastri, thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with me. Your first comments on the numbers we saw on the 4th of June.
The results we saw on the 4th of June vindicated for me the earthly wisdom of the Indian voter. You see, throughout the campaign, we had talked about the future of Indian democracy and what happens to the voice of the people. I think this election result for me clearly showed two things. Firstly, the voter in India asserting the importance of a viable, visible, and reasonably strong opposition. And on the other hand, it also sought to make the party in power a little more accountable by requiring it to be under the broader framework of the alliance it was originally part of and focus much more on the bigger alliance picture which the result has caused. So I think for me this is the biggest lesson of this election, that you a party which has been in power for a decade is required to go back to its larger alliance to indicate its majority, and you have a substantive presence of an opposition within the Lok Sabha, which for me is the Indian voter saying that the strength of our democracy lies in a government which is accountable and an opposition which is visible.
Right. So, a couple of months back, Lokniti-CSDS did a pre-poll survey, and two major issues that really stood out were unemployment, inflation, and of course, there was price rise as part of that as well. Now, 2 months later, when you sort of look back at the campaign, when you look at the voting pattern uh, of whatever has transpired, do you see a tangible effect of the voter keeping these issues in mind before they actually go out and vote? In simple words, have these issues really made a mark, as far as bringing down the tally of the Bharatiya Janata Party is concerned? Because they've been in power for 10 years, and the Indian voter has, you speak to people around and then they say ki unemployment, inflation are big issues. So do you think those two issues that were highlighted in the survey did actually play a role in the election?
See, point number one, the campaign and issues raised by different parties seems to have had an impact, because our study shows that 1/4 of the voters only said that we decided on who to vote for prior to the start of the campaign, prior to the announcing of candidates. The others spoke about deciding when to vote either after the candidates were declared or after the campaign began or closer to the last date of campaign. So for me, this response of our of those who are part of our survey, and we are convinced our survey represents a miniature of the universe it is supposed to represent, clearly shows that during the campaign, the issues that were raised were very much on the minds of the voter when they decided on who to vote for. And as we have indicated in our first series of articles in the Hindu, the whole question of economic issues seems to have had an impact. The welfare programs of different levels of government was at the background, more not so much in terms of the welfare programs, but more in terms of how did the voters see those programs implemented on the ground. Did they really see the benefit of this program coming to them on the ground? And we have consistently been maintaining that more than half the voters have been saying that unemployment and price rise are two important concerns for them. And I think this result shows that the voter focused on the concern, but was also much more focused on who she thought can provide a solution to this concern. we tend to focus on the problem, but do not keep in mind that the voter is also looking at who she or he thinks is the one most likely to provide a meaningful solution to the problem. And I think this result does indicate how the voter looks at the capacities of different parties in being able to respond to the problems that they feel are confronting them in their daily lives.
Dr. Shastri, many political analysts have pointed out over the years that India's elections are increasingly becoming presidential. In 2019, 2014, it was all about Modi versus Rahul, and who's the bigger and the better leader. In fact, the post-poll survey that was published in the Hindu today showed that prime ministerial choice preferences for Narendra Modi stood at 41%, and the second best was Rahul Gandhi at about 27%. So, do you think the Modi factor that's been almost the overarching factor as far as the Bharatiya Janata Party is concerned, that Modi magic
Uh,
has faded?
with your permission, I would like to make a small change in the larger contour of this question. I don't think this is a presidential style election, but what I would call a prime ministerial style election, because there are important differences between a presidential style and a prime ministerial style. The BJP very much wanted this election to be a leadership election, and their entire campaign across this country tried to emphasize that point. All their candidates said it's not a vote for them, but a vote for a third term for the government under the leadership of the Prime Minister. And the opposition very clearly skirted the leadership issue and said that for us, the election is an election on alternative policies, strategies, and programs. Now, what did this election result and the survey that we did show us on this matter? Now, beyond a shadow of doubt, a big chunk of the BJP supporters saw leadership as the key factor. And as you yourself pointed out, there was close to 42% of the vote of the respondents in our survey who said that their preferred choice of prime minister was Mr. Modi. And please remember that in our survey, we don't offer names. We just ask people, who would you like to see as the prime minister after the election? And 42% said Mr. Modi. I also would like to point out that this is a slight fall from the percentage that we had in 2019. Lesser percentage of respondents mentioned Mr. Modi as their preferred prime ministerial choice as compared to 2019. And the gap between those who referred to Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi as their preferred prime ministerial choice has gone down. That's one point that we need to emphasize. Our survey also points out to a second issue. We also ask a question to people as to, if Mr. Narendra Modi were not the prime ministerial candidate, would you change the way you voted? In 2014, 24% of BJP voters said we would have changed the way we voted. In 2019, 32% of BJP voters said we would have changed the way they voted, which means in 2014, one of every four BJP voters said we would have changed the way we voted if Mr. Modi were not the prime ministerial candidate. This goes up to 1/3 in 2019. It has come back to 1/4 in this election. In this election, it's come back to 25% of the BJP voters who say that if Mr. Modi were not the prime ministerial choice, we would have voted for some other party. Which links this to another point that I'd like to make. More than half the respondents have said that what is most important for us when deciding who to vote for is the party. More than 50% of respondents say party is important. Then they give importance to the local candidate, and 10% say the prime ministerial candidate is the one that makes the difference, which again is reduced percentages from 2019. So, beyond a a shadow of doubt, the BJP's focus on the prime ministerial candidate they had was important and useful for them. But somewhere that support seems to have plateaued. The benefit that the BJP got from the leadership factor seems to have plateaued, and it does not seem to have significantly increased this time around. And a greater weightage to the party was given in deciding and defining who to vote for. And I think this is a important dimension that emerges from the survey data that we have just released in the first set of articles which came today in the Hindu.
Absolutely. In fact, for the audience, we'll have those numbers play up on the screen. This is like Dr. Shastri said. This was published in the Hindu. Dr. Shastri, help me understand this. Table 2, this is Rahul versus Modi. Has anything changed since 2014? Prime Ministerial choice Narendra Modi. 2014 post poll said it's 36. 2024 post poll says it is 41. Yes, like you mentioned, 2019 it was 47. It has come down slightly. But if you compare it with somebody like Rahul Gandhi or even with 2014 post poll figures for Mr. Modi himself, that number seems to have gone up. But on the contrary, when you look at the seat tally, it's the BJP compared to its allies that has taken the biggest hit. 63 seats is what they it's what they've come down by. If you go by 240 seats is what they won and compared it to 303. So how does this play out? So the popularity of Prime Minister Modi is still there, but when it comes to voting for the Bharatiya Janata Party in the number of seats, that comes down from 2019, which was almost a wave election. 2014 too was a wave election. This, what many would call, was a saw semblance of normalcy as far as the elections were concerned. So how do you look at these numbers, and help me put these numbers in perspective, Dr. Shastri?
Now, the leadership factor and preference for leader is very much linked to the vote that goes for a particular party, both in the case of BJP and to a little lesser extent in the case of the Congress. And what you notice is that in the case of the BJP, while there is an overall vote share decline, this is critically linked to the party's performance in three important states. And these are three states which, in terms of numbers, contribute quite significantly. I'm talking of the states of Uttar Pradesh, I'm talking of the state of Bihar, and I'm talking of the state of Maharashtra. All these three states saw a visible decline in the seat share that the BJP got. In UP, the BJP contested on its own, and you see a decline of its. Of course, it had two small partners there, but you see a decline in its seat share. Similarly, in Maharashtra, you had an NDA alliance, while the alliance partners also did not do as well. The BJP also saw a decline in its performance as compared to 2019. And the same story is true to a certain extent on Bihar. The allies holding on, whereas the BJP itself witnessing a decline. And where it has done better, like the states of Odisha and Telangana, those states have lesser numbers, so it could not offset the decline that you saw in three big states like Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and in Bihar. And that accounts for this vote share decline, what I would like to say. On the other hand, you notice that where the Congress has done well overall in the at the national level, its vote share has gone up, and that to a certain extent corresponds also with the increased preference for Rahul Gandhi as the prime ministerial candidate. You will notice that it is directly linked to, in important ways, the vote share of the party increasing in certain critical states of the country.
Dr. Shastri, would one be right if they conclude that the Modi factor or the Modi wave Modi magic, whichever way you put it, is on the decline. Would one be right in drawing that conclusion based on the numbers that the party has got right now?
Uh, it may be an overstretch to say it is declined, but I would definitely say that there is a plateau that has come in that. And what was in 2014 and 2019, the leadership factor which helped the party propel itself to come to power and do so well, you do not see a increased impact of the leadership factor this time around. That has plateaued to a certain extent. And because of the poorer performance in certain states of the country, the overall preferred prime minister percentage for Mr. Modi has come down marginally. And I think that factor is linked to the decline in its vote share in certain states. Now, is it that the support which was earlier enjoyed because of the charisma of the prime minister is now being turned to support for the party? Because as I told you earlier, more than half the respondents in our survey said party is the most important factor on which we vote. So, did the support for the BJP come as a party? And people could argue that the party was represented by the prime minister. So rather than the focus on the prime minister, it was on the party, is what some people could argue. But definitely there is a plateauing in the support that the BJP received because of the leadership factor.
Right. Let's move on to the role of regional parties, because on one hand, if you look at the NDA, 2014 2019 is when they, technically, if you go by numbers, they really didn't need the allies. On the other hand, the opposition, which was like when he said all over the place until very recently, have now cobbled up this alliance, and here they were putting up a fight in each state. So in West Bengal, the Trinamool Congress shined. In Uttar Pradesh, it was the Samajwadi Party that stole the show, supplemented by the Congress. In Maharashtra, of course, the Congress emerged as the single largest party, but then you had somebody like Mr. Sharad Pawar and Mr. Uddhav Thackeray who added and who gave that much needed momentum to the opposition. On the other hand, when you look at parties that did not align with either of the blocks, somebody like a Biju Janata Dal or YSRCP that's led by Jagan Mohan Reddy, they've been completely routed in the election. So, in the current context, how do you see the role of regional parties playing out in Indian politics?
Uh, with your permission, I would prefer to use another term. I, in my writings, have avoided using now the term regional parties. I prefer to use the term state-based parties. They are parties whose electoral support is largely limited to a particular state. What does the 2024 polls show? That state-based parties have increasingly done well when they have been aligned with one of the two major coalitions that are emerging in the country. Because if you look at the numbers, other than the NDA or the opposition coalition, the numbers have shrunk. And if I remember right, they have shrunk to 17 to 18 seats for parties and independents who are outside the fold of the two major alliances. So that's the first point I'd like to make. The second point I'd like to make is both in the NDA and in the India alliance, state-based parties are very critical players. If you look at the NDA-led alliance, yes, the BJP may account for 80% of the alliance, but that balance 20% of the alliance is essentially these state-based parties. And that's why you see the focus on two of those state-based parties which account for 10% of the NDA, the TDP and the Janata Dal United. Now, This 30 seats that the two of them together have, 18 for the TDP and 12 for the JDU, now they have become important because those 30 seats are critical for the BJP to its 240 seats to come closer to the halfway mark. So state-based parties within the NDA are the ones which are propelling the NDA towards the majority. On the other hand, if you look at the India coalition, you will notice there that the Congress forms 99 out of the coalition of 230 plus. Now, which means a large part of the coalition is actually the non-Congress political parties, be it the Samajwadi Party, be it the Trinamool Congress. They are the ones who are, and the DMK. These are the key players in the coalition led by the Congress. And I must also add here the Uddhav Thackeray Shiv Sena and the NCP led by Sharad Pawar. Now, these 5-6 parties are key players within the India coalition, and they are a substantive number, more or less equal to what the Congress is in that coalition. So, in both the ruling and opposition coalition, you see the strong role that the state-based parties are playing in propelling these coalitions forward. And therefore, in both these coalitions, you see the increased focus on state-based parties. The state-based parties' leadership is given so much of focus in the post-election scenario.
Right. Let's talk about these results from the standpoint of the Congress. Dr. Shastri, does it look like the Congress Party or the India Alliance, their goal, did it seem to you that their goal was to not win, but instead ensure that the BJP's tally comes down so that it becomes tricky for them to form the government? Because the issues that they have been raising throughout the election has been if the BJP gets a brute majority, they will change the constitution, crony capitalism, caste census, unemployment, inflation. These are the issues that they raise. But when you look at the overall picture, does it look to you as if the the India Alliance, my apologies, was not looking to really form the government, but ensure that at the same time the BJP finds it extremely difficult to cobble up the numbers given the majority that they had in the last two elections? Do you see it that way, Dr. Shastri?
See, one of the ironies of this election result is those who did not win the election are also claiming a victory in this election. And the ones who claim a victory in this election have actually seen a decline of 60 seats for the party, though the coalition has come to power. Now, you are right in saying that when this campaign began, the Congress and its supporters were more focusing on saying that the BJP will not touch 370 and the alliance will not touch 400. They were not talking about where they will be, but they were more talking about where the BJP and NDA will be. That our aim is to prevent the BJP and NDA from achieving the numbers that they are talking about. But once each phase of the poll was completed, I would say to a certain extent the whole focus of the campaign changed. After the first round of voting, you have the BJP as part of its campaign starting a strong offensive against the opposition. I have always argued that the BJP really comes on its own when it is challenging the opponent rather than defending their own position. So after the first phase, you see once the manifesto was released, you see a total change in the focus of the campaign, where the attack was on the Congress manifesto, and the debate now, and I think this is an important point to mention, the debate now shifted from the BJP setting the agenda to the Congress and its supporters setting the agenda, and the Congress and the BJP responding to the agenda. The BJP seemed to be responding to the agenda which was being said. No, we will not change the constitution. This is what the Congress is promising. This is the type of manifesto they are. So the whole contours of the debate changed after the first round of voting. And to a certain extent, I think this also enthused the opposition to take the battle forward. Their focus on local issues, especially where opposition parties were in power in the states, their focus on the state governments in many states helped. And I could take the specific case of West Bengal here, and the marginal success the Congress achieved in Telangana and Karnataka was also an account of this. And I think ultimately, when the results came out, the India-led group said that our numbers indicate a defeat of the BJP and support for us. So even though they were not, they are still not very categorical on this, but the fact that they are not likely to form the government this time, and they will be sitting in the opposition, in spite of that, the focus is on a victory for them, which I think is something which we must give them the credit for, because you will now have an official opposition party in the Lok Sabha and an official leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha. So you're right. The numbers which the opposition was able to pull through in this election, and the fact that the ruling party now had to use the larger umbrella of the NDA to say that we have a majority, is, I think, a clear reflection. These two dimensions are a clear reflection of how this particular election has transformed the political landscape in the country.
Dr. Shastri, my penultimate question to you. We spoke about the Congress. Let's look at it from the BJP perspective. For Mr. Modi personally, he hasn't been used to really leading a government with allies, taking all leaders together. He's someone who's enjoyed a large support base in terms of people and in terms of the number of seats they won. Right from his Gujarat days, in Gujarat he saw a majority, in 2014 he saw a majority, in 2019 he saw an even bigger mandate. Cut to 2024, things look slightly different. It's almost like the BJP has to go back to the Vajpayee days, where you have allies, where you have to sort of take everyone together. How big a challenge you think this will be for the Bharatiya Janata Party to ensure that they keep their allies together? We are talking on the 6th of June. At the moment, as numbers stand, as allies stand, Nitish Kumar has pledged support to the NDA. Chandrababu Naidu has pledged support to the NDA. But some would say that, look, does this support really matter going in the long run? Because everyone knows the track record of Mr. Nitish Kumar. Everyone knows the track record of Chandrababu Naidu. So how tough a challenge will it be for Mr. Modi, for the Bharatiya Janata Party, to keep this alliance intact, just so that Mr. Modi could really lead this government, Dr. Shastri?
I'll make 2 points on this. First, the apprehensions which are being expressed today about how this coalition will move forward is linked to the fact that for the last 10 years, you did have a NDA government, but you had an NDA government in which BJP had a majority on its own, and the allies were given what was called a notional representation in the ministry. Also, the fact that the Prime Minister has led this government for 10 years with a clear majority, and even earlier when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, he led the government with a clear BJP majority. So the first point is the same leadership having to lead a a government with a coalition. You were leading a coalition earlier also, but now you are leading a coalition where you do not have a majority. So that's where a lot of questions are springing up. And it will be now the negotiation skills of the BJP leadership and how they adjust to this new situation of leading a coalition where they don't have a majority, which will be closely watched. My point number two, when in 1999, Vajpayee led the NDA coalition, let's remember the total NDA numbers were just 5 more than what they are now. If you see the NDA numbers today, and if you see the NDA numbers of 1999, it was 5 seats more. However, where is the difference? In 1999, the BJP was in the mid hundreds, I think, if I remember right, 166 or something close to that, out of the total number. So there was a big chunk of the NDA which was non-BJP. This time around, as I told you, 80% of the NDA is the BJP. So one important difference is there. In 1999, in the first cabinet, there were 45 ministers, of whom only 30 belonged to the BJP and 15 belonged to other political parties in the NDA. Now, that may have been because of the numbers the BJP had within the coalition. This time around, one will be keenly watching what is the percentage of the BJP share in the Council of Ministers. I'm not saying that 1999 will repeat itself, because now the BJP is clearly the dominant party in the coalition. But even though they are the dominant party, the fact of the support of the 50 plus others who are giving them the majority becomes then important. So I think these are the two factors one is going to look out for as this government is formed and as this government takes its agenda forward.
Dr. Shastri, my final question to you. You began your opening comments were about voters, about democracy. When you look at these numbers, given what we've seen over the last 10 years, a very controversial tenure as far as Mr. Modi was concerned, the BJP is blank, even the communal overtures that we saw as far as the BJP was concerned, and that too with a brute majority. Now, when you look at the same Bharatiya Janata Party, the same set of leaders, many sitting union ministers have lost, many high-profile leaders have lost, and the India alliance has sort of put up a strong fight. And now when you look at the numbers, you see 294 versus something around 234, 235. What does, I wouldn't say it's the beginning of a coalition era, but I would certainly, I think it would be safe to say that we're entering into another phase of coalition years as far as the government is concerned. How critical are coalitions for a democracy vis-a-vis a brute majority?
See, in democracies, the fact of coalition is a byproduct of the diversity of results that you find. The fact of coalition is because a single party is not able to marshal a majority, and therefore that party needs to work with other parties to be able to garner that majority. And that's what the voter in India has indicated in the 2024 elections. That now, as I said right in the beginning, elections are a great political leveler, and the wisdom of the voter in India is something which clearly indicates that they are giving everyone something to take away from the table. See, you have an opposition which has been strengthened in terms of its numbers, and you have their visible presence on the floor of the Lok Sabha. You have a ruling party whose numbers may have come down, but the alliance they lead has been given a majority, and now you are more and more seeing, since the 4th of June, reference to the NDA and a secondary reference to the BJP. You see, Earlier, we used to find a reference to the BJP and, like a belated afterthought, a reference to the NDA. But today, even if you look at the Prime Minister's speech on the 4th of June evening, his focus was on the NDA. Remember, when he talked of Andhra, he referred to the role of Chandrababu Naidu in the victory in Andhra. When he talked of Bihar, he referred to the role of Nitish Kumar in the victory of Bihar. So you see a change in the language template also, which is necessitated by the reality of politics. And this is what the Indian voter has done in 2024. It has strengthened the opposition and has made the ruling party, in a sense, more accountable by having the ruling party to work within the coalition it is part of, with the coalition getting a majority and not the ruling party itself getting a majority on its own. And this, I think, is the greatest lesson that democracy teaches us when it operates. And that's why I go back always to say the hero of this election is the voter of India.
Absolutely. What a wonderful thought to end this conversation on, Dr. Sandeep Shastri. Thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with me. The data points, the arguments you presented were really insightful, and I'm sure it'll be the same for the viewers once they watch this interview. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank
To
you.
our viewers, thank you so much for tuning into this conversation.